Welcome to the Family Pictures Podcast. I'm Michael Branson Smith, and I'm here with
Jim Groom.
That's right. Now he gets to say his name. That's the new way we do this. And we're doing yet another movie we've never seen before. And this one is quite random because it is a TV movie from 1993, directed by Michael Ritchie, who has a great CV. He did the Bad News Bears.
Weird CV, though.
Oh, but it's still awesome. Bad News Bears, Fletch, Downhill Racers, Wildcats. Anyway, the reason I picked this is it's an HBO TV movie based on a real, true story of Wanda Holloway, who apparently tried to hire, through her ex-husband's brother, a hitman to kill her daughter's cheerleading competition. And we get this kind of tragic comic film known as The Positively True Adventures of the Alleged Texas Cheerleading-Murdering Mom, played by Holly Hunter. And it's kind of remarkable. It's not something that it just kind of popped up in my list of movies as I was wandering through 1993. And I was like, whoa, Holly Hunter. Okay. Whoa, yeah. Beau Bridgers. And then your regular cast of TV actors that are pretty well known. And then it's like, what's the film we did about the Pennsylvania family that was the stealing tractors?
At Close Range.
At Close Range. It's another one of those kind of films. So it's a crime story of sorts that becomes so ridiculous because it gets so intertwined in the culture of tabloid journalism in the 90s that it doesn't even feel real.
No, it doesn't. And a couple of things about this, that immediately... I was watching it with Antonella, and she was like, "What is this?" And I'm like, it's not something I've ever heard of before. And it turns out, because thinking it was a movie, it was not. It was a TV movie.
Yep.
It was produced by HBO, which is interesting because I wonder if this is when HBO was kind of starting to make the push that by The Sopranos or even Oz, it would become, a full-blown series and kind of really start what we know as the golden age of television. Maybe
right.
Part two. I don't know. There's probably a golden age before.
I mean,
then.
This definitely would have been a prestige TV series now, right?
Yeah,
and you could see Holly Hunter still playing the role of Wanda Holloway, but the amount of time we would have gotten to know the culture of what is it, Channelview, Texas, which is a suburb of Houston, would have been laid out, I think, more extensively, and the cast of characters of the community would have been larger. And God, I think it would have been an amazing series. And what's interesting is there was a 2023, which was another similar, Texas wife. It was the story of Candy Montgomery, who in 1980 murdered her former lover's wife, Betty Gore, and she was acquitted for self-defense, even though she struck her 21 times with an axe. But HBO went on to turn this into the series Love and Death, which debuted in 2023, and it was Elizabeth Olsen who played Candy Montgomery. So, equally, like you think of Elizabeth Olsen is a kind of Holly Hunter of the 90s, if you think about it.
It's interesting too. And so the other thing Antonella said while we were watching, and she was right, is like, it's kind of like Fargo, but not as funny or as dark. And I think there is something where there's a kind of mashup between Raising Arizona and Fargo in this. It's like a Coen Brothers movie without the writing, right?
Or the budget too.
Or the budget, right?
And I what I ultimately came away with this thinking is Michael Ritchie is playing with, he knows it's a TV movie. And, there's this meta moment where it's towards the end of the film and, all of the major players, and we'll get into the plot of what happens, are being pitched by networks and tabloids to sell their stories. And there's one of the characters is saying like, so who do you think will play Wanda? And she literally says, Holly Hunter.
That's right. And then she's like, no, she's all wrong for them.
Yeah. And mentioned some TV actress, soap opera actress instead would be more, that she's more Wanda.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
Because she's trashy. And, classism in this community and social mobility is a big part of this story. But yeah, I like the comparison to Fargo. That's an interesting take. But I think
it is.
Michael Ritchie plays with, like, he knows it's a TV movie. He's like literally, one of the things that it struck me, I was listening to when the Beau Bridges character who plays Terry Harper, who's like the brother-in-law, who's like works at one of the refineries. And there's this song about a company man going. I was like, what is this song? And it's like kind of country, but it's kind of off. And I'm looking for it, and I can't find like a well-known artist who's recorded it. And then so I'm like, okay, I have to figure this out. And this is one of those things where you're trying to watch the movie and you just suddenly stop. So, and by the way, one of the things we should mention is this movie, you can't find it other than on DVD. And so it was just posted as YouTube. So to watch this movie, we both watched it on YouTube, which was also kind of weird.
So that's an interesting point, right? So I saw it on DVD. It was too late to buy it and get it in time because it doesn't look great on YouTube. But it's there, so you can watch it.
And it's in 4:3 too, right? It's TV formatted.
That's right. It is. And so anyway, this led to, so my son comes in at some point while I'm watching this, and I explain that, this is the only, because he's like, it looks terrible, Dad. And I'm like, but this is the only way we could get it. And he's like, that's the problem. I'm like, what? He's like, that's why we need more piracy. So I was like, what? He's like, we need more people seeding movies like that because it's these companies that are determining what we can and can't watch. And I'm like, the boy has learned well.
Yeah, he is. He's got his VPN and his torrent tracker.
I'm like, go seed it, boy. But let's wait till the DVD is out. And
I know. Well, we got to first. Let's come on, son. Handbrake, rip the DVD. Let's see if we can upscale it a little bit. Maybe there's some AI tools to even improve that.
Put down that cocktail, son. It's done.
Is that an MKV or an MP4, son? Let's talk about the merits of both. Okay, now we are really digressing. Anyway, so Michael Ritchie, I was like looking for this song about Company Man, and so I go to the end credits. I open another window and reload the YouTube video, which is funny, and then I go very end, and there's Company Man, written by Michael Ritchie, and then I see the next song, written by Michael Ritchie, and then I realize the entire soundtrack. The music is by this one woman, and then the who is, I just want to get it right, Lucy Simon, and the lyrics to every song is written by Michael Ritchie. So this not only is he's like, well, we have no budget, but in the trope of it being a TV film, he's like, I'm gonna write these trashy fake country songs that are emblematic of the moments of the film, just to make sure I have a soundtrack that speaks to me.
Where does this take us back to, Michael? Where does that return us to? I got lots of problems. Female trouble.
Well, there is truly female trouble in this film, and we should start to get into it. So Holly Hunter, again, plays Wanda Holloway, and there's this wonderful, wonderful article that I read. It was like, must have been like 8,000 words, written by Mimi Schwartz in the Texas Monthly in 1991. So kind of in the time, so the events of this story took place in the 90s, early 90s. And so everything's kind of gone on, and it's still not quite over. There's still story to be told about these women and what happens to them. But she gives us wonderful portrait of not just, Wanda and her upbringing and what made her who she was, but also Channelview, the town. And so Channelview, which is basically a port town of the Gulf of Mexico, or America, the Gulf of Mexico and the Gulf of Mexico. Jim's in Italy, so he's not catching that one right there.
I'm sorry. Am I supposed to laugh at these jokes?
No. I guess it's a bad joke. All right. So this
I'm having fun. I'm doing research while you're talking.
Okay. Oh, that's fine. So it's a suburb, like it's a minor suburb of Houston, and it's a gas refinery town. And she writes a lot about how this is one of those kind of hard scrabble towns where people have fences and mean dogs that keep people away, even though there's just a kind of a quote unquote nice area that seems a little more bucolic. But it's literally a town that's lit up by the tankers and ports at night that are pumping oil into the refineries. And most of the residents have like similar economic statuses, and no one's like really striving. And the interesting thing is that Wanda was ambitious, right? She wanted to be a striver. She was from the other side of the tracks. There is a nicer part of town that she doesn't live in when she's growing up. And she took business courses in high school, and she dressed really well, which put her at odds with like her peers in high school, because they would see her as someone who's trying too hard, right? She's like, she was sadly denied the and we're going to get into this, the upward mobility that comes with being a cheerleader as a girl, like the social mobility that, as two Northeastern kids were like, wait, what? But in Texas,
Exactly.
where cheerleading in my town was just like, there's not many going after it, but in Texas and other places of the South, that the kind of, what is it, the culture of pageants and things like that.
It would make sense, right? Because if Friday Night Lights and Texas football is basically a state, like that is the football these folks turn into, and this is real. I guess it would make sense that cheerleading is, almost as big.
Yeah, and they talk about that. And so she doesn't have access the way that she wanted to have it, because her father's very religious, and the outfits are against his conservative Christian. They're too skimpy, blah. Oh,
Baptist.
No. Yeah. Oh, wait, this is actually a great story. I have a really good side story that I have to tell. So in the early 2000s, when I was starting my job at York College, and I was working in the studio running media for this ed tech department, and at the same time, my wife was starting a nonprofit in New York City called Row New York. And, she was doing it out of our apartment. So there was no office. There was no way to ship stuff. So we used to have stuff shipped to York College, which had a proper dock. There was like literally an outboard engine showed up at the dock, and I then put it in the car. Anyway, but one day there were these, classic cheerleader megaphones, okay, that were delivered, so that's what the coaches use as they're talking to the athletes on the water. And then days later, in my inbox was a big, thick catalog, no less than like an inch thick. And on the cover was a 12-year-old girl in a cheerleading outfit. This is at my office. All right. I'm now getting a catalog for girls cheerleading at my workplace. And I was like, this cannot continue.
Yeah, exactly. Who's that? What is this reading material, Michael? What's going on?
In my new employment, it's like, why is this man getting this stuff delivered here? So that stopped.
But wait, why did you get it?
Because of the megaphones. We had the megaphones delivered to York College. And so they followed up and sent a catalog that I was like, oh my God, I am going to get in so much trouble with my boss if he sees this.
That's awesome.
Anyway, so it's, despite being Wanda, now back to the actual story, Wanda being smart, super well dressed and a striver in a town that doesn't, isn't defined by strivers.
It seems like everybody has a 5-year plan.
Yeah. Oh, well, we'll get to Terry.
They are strivers.
And I love Marla so much. She's probably my favorite character in this movie.
Nuts, yes.
But she still marries her high school sweetheart at age 18. And then it all falls apart. And then she's kind of put into the classic box of time to have kids. And this is kind of where we enter the story as she transfers her aspirations onto her daughter primarily. Because she did not get the status that she wanted. So she comes into this story wanting so badly for her daughter, Shanna, to become a cheerleader. And boy, is it not easy to become a cheerleader in Channel View, Texas.
Yeah, I mean, okay, and also another piece of this that was interesting is Holly Hunter. Obviously, Holly Hunter plays the mom,
Yeah.
and she is as if she walked out of Raising Arizona right onto the set of this because she's kind of really thick accent,
Oh yeah.
really fast talking.
It's and really really extra thick. Like she is like the scene with her and Terry when they actually talk out the idea of killing Verna and Amber. It's just incredible. Like it's probably the best scene of the movie. It's kind of incredibly rewatchable. She's just a tour de force.
She is. I mean, she's great in this, and her hair, just
Oh, yeah.
the hair,
Outfits.
I mean, everything. I mean, she's great, but she also has this wild laugh, right?
Yeah.
So you don't know if they're trying to say to you like this woman's insane, or she's super savvy like a fox. Like it's very unclear at times, like where she's coming from because the way in which Holly Hunter plays this character is actually really complex, I think. I mean, and quite
Absolutely.
well done.
And I think Wanda, I mean, to the point, like the this article written by Mimi Schwartz talked about people's descriptions of Wanda. It's like she was always kind of checking things out. She was, someone who read the scene and knew she was not in a good position socially, so she was trying to craft her way, and that's kind of the thing about what we learn about the cheerleading scene. And so the competition is Verna Heath. So it's interesting. So literally Verna Heath and her daughter Amber live right around the corner in real life from Wanda and her daughter Shane. And Wanda at this point is remarried, so she's divorced Tony. All right, their marriage failed. Tony has got like some sexy something that's always, they're both multiple times in the movie they're pictured in bed together half naked it's like Wanda argues with Tony on the phone about child support and things like that. It's just amazing.
And he's got that like bed tray of food.
And we should
shirtless.
We should take a moment to give us a sense of like suburban culture. Like I think what was so cool about this is, what's the other film with that's your emblem of suburban culture?
Firstborn. I can't believe you didn't remember that.
Well, I can't remember anything except for the thing I just studied the past
Firstborn.
hour. So Firstborn.
You should watch Firstborn, everybody.
Yeah. So in Firstborn, this is Jim's obsession of this is the perfect depiction of suburban life in the Northeast.
It
in the
might
80s.
be the greatest movie ever made. I'm thinking more and more that's the case.
Well, this probably gosh, I wish if we had like a Texas representative, the way they probably could talk about the description of suburban life in a Texas house, and it's definitely very fancy. They're striving in the Heath and I don't know, it's not the Hardy household at this point, like I guess because Wanda has remarried CD, who's
Eddie Jones.
Eddie Jones, who's like a character actor. He's like the bad guy in like 18 episodes times 10.
He's the police chief in Chud, one of my all-time favorites. So like this guy is like everywhere as a character actor in bad movies of the 80s.
In TV shows. Like
he's amazing.
He's the classic like. I've told Jim this in the past, but never on this in the context of the podcast, where I think one of my fantasy jobs would have been like I would have loved to have been a bad guy character actor in like 80s sitcom shows like Magnum PI or the A-Team or Starsky and Hutch. It's just such a great job. You just get to do this dumb acrobatic stuff, and then you get dragged by your scruff as you get put in jail because no one ever gets killed really in these shows.
I'll tell you, that's one of my favorite scenes from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is when the character played by I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. Famous actor Brad Pitt.
Brad Pitt, yeah.
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah.
DiCaprio's character is, his career's on the decline, and he's in TV shows, and he's playing a bad guy, and with a shotgun, and you can see them relishing those bad guy scenes so much. It's awesome.
It's such a great role, like just to be bad
Yeah,
for
awesome.
for light comedy, light drama, light action fare is probably
And
the best way
it
to
was an
describe it.
episode of FBI, and he was basically hijacking a military car or
Yeah.
truck. It was great.
So CD plays the much older, 20 years older in real life, husband of Wanda. But he has some wealth. I think he has his own business, an insurance company or something. He's doing okay. So there's
Yeah.
money, and so Wanda has found her upward mobility of some sort, right?
It was funny because, as we were watching this movie, and Antonella was kind of into this one, which I was surprised. And she was like, when looking at CD, was like, is that her husband?
Yeah.
Or is it her father? Or is it because there's obviously he looks very much older. He's not maybe like she's kind of young, attractive,
Super attractive.
Yeah, and he's not. And so like
all.
there is that sense of like, how does he fit into this picture? And you figure out quickly that he's the sugar daddy.
Yeah, and he has there's a great scene where he's just always in the background, and he says things like, "Good steak." Maybe sell a couple more T-bells, or
That's
he just
right.
just cocks his shotgun as he cleans it in the background.
That's awesome. I agree.
That's about all CD does, but we know he has a role to play, and that he provides for Wanda, that she can take her daughter to, and this is important. This is getting into the cheerleading and social mobility in Texas. So Verna Heath. She literally came from a family of cheerleaders. Her mom taught she and her daughters how to be literally twirlers and win competitions because her mom came from nothing. She was poor, and she knew that this was a way to get status and have mobility as social mobility as a young woman. And so that's a big part of this story. And so Verna's approach is the next step, which is the more modern approach. And they get into, what was it? It's the gymnastics school. So because as we know, cheerleading, I've learned this from my wife, who knows a lot about college sports through her job, and in running a sports organization. The sport with the highest rate of injury of all college sports is cheerleading by far.
Wow. I would have not have guessed that.
Because they throw these tiny women like 2 stories into the air, and guess what? They don't always catch them.
How sick is that? Yeah, exactly.
And so Verna takes her daughter, and so does ultimately Wanda, to the Alpha Gymnastics Studio to train their daughters to do all the gymnastic tumbling that they now have to do. They can't just get away with twirling and cheering, right? So they have to do it all. And what was interesting in the description of that culture by Mimi Schwartz was that it reminded me of how we, through film and real stories, men watch their sons and coaches in films like Hoosiers. You remember the basketball film, and how much the dads are haranguing their sons from the sidelines during practice. And the same thing with Friday Night Lights. And the mothers basically are playing that role with their daughters, and they wince when their girls miss a tumble, and they jockey the coaches and teachers and have them get private lessons, which basically is sustained to today. And it's kind of one
absolutely.
of the
it's probably worse today, right?
Way worse. Yeah, it's crazy how much,
because now there's money attached to college sports.
Even more than ever. First it was money through scholarship, but now it's money, real money.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, that mobility is real and desired. And so this is a big part of what drives Wanda to push her daughter into this system, but things go awry. What do you remember of the system and how it's described? How are basically Shanna and Amber, who otherwise would be just good friends in any other circumstance, they literally have their parent. They've known each other practically their whole lives through the school system. They're both pretty, and they're both pretty talented as cheerleaders. One has kind of the air of royalty coming from a cheerleading family, but now they're at loggerheads as they have to compete.
Yeah, they have to compete. There's only 4 spots, and I think they're competing to get on the high school squad.
That was the junior high squad.
The junior high school squad.
Junior, like it's like the 8th grade squad. As in the film, it's portrayed. They actually competed in real life to get on the 7th grade squad, and she lost. And then the 8th grade squad is what we see in the film, which is where the ruler incident happens. So what happens?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is when Holly Hunter's at her best. So if we're talking about the ruler incidents, right? Holly Hunter's like, last year, X gave out candy, and that's one of the ways she won hearts and minds. So this year we're going to one-up it. And so we're going to create the ruler that's basically a promotion of her daughter. And when she goes to the teacher, to the like teacher parent night to find out, she's told that the only thing you can give is a handout.
A little flyer,
And she has spent $360 split with her, her ex-husband. And so she gets pissed and she brings up what happened last year. And she said there's favoritism. And so you realize there's a history here. And I like the way that it's kind of brought up slowly. But this woman is having none of it. You can see she has no patience for Wanda. Wanda and her have been at it before, seemingly. And so we start to realize that all that money's wasted. And that Wanda's pissed, and that there is going to be what you realize, what becomes the kind of crux of the movie in some ways. They're going to find some way to use those rulers.
Yeah, and so the rulers become, kind of the MacGuffin of the downfall,
exactly,
or the MacGuffin of the murder plot, if you will, right?
Yeah,
and so she still gets caught. Passing out the rulers. And so the other thing to just keep in mind,
smartly
so
though,
you're
I like the way.
Yeah, but you're not just chosen by, say, a body of experts of who's going to be cheerleaders. Like now you would think, oh, coach chooses who's on the football team. Why wouldn't cheerleading coach choose who's on the cheerleading team? No, there's somehow voting involved. And so there's where the campaigning happens. And this campaigning leads to all sorts of things. Like the previous year, Verna had put candies on her flyers for her daughter, Amber.
Yeah. And even had gotten on to what seems like a public school squad, even though she was at a private school.
Right.
And so there was all this bending of rules. And now come this year when Wanda's daughter is stepping up to kind of try, all of those rules got so strict because of what happened last year. And I think this is when at one point where you can see Wanda is somewhat justified and you can identify with her because she's like, so they were fine last year to bend rules and do what you want. But now this year from my daughter, none of that's going to happen. And you could see where she might be legitimately angry at the whole situation. And not angry enough to knock someone off, but
well, she's cast as the outsider in this cheerleading circles because back at the Alpha Gymnastics Academy, where all those mothers are watching their daughters and fretting them, falling on the mats, she's sitting alone, right? Wanda's sitting alone while Verna is amongst like the pecking group, and she fits right in, and she wants to fit in, and she knows the only way she's gonna fit in is if her daughter gets on the team. So she wants this as much for herself as she does for her daughter, of course. That's a big part of this.
I agree.
Yeah, and so it's really gross. So what ends up happening is, so she gives out the rule. She gives out her flyers using the ruler as kind of like a handle.
I like that.
It's clever.
It makes sense, right? You put the ruler, and it's kind of like you have a little paper handout with a holder.
Yeah.
I thought it was brilliant.
It was, but it got her disqualified. And so devastated, Wanda is like, there's this great scene of her trying to lobby for her daughter, and she's got this giant plastic sippy cup, basically. She's like sucking on water, and this is something I've actually observed in real life. One of Amanda's good friends from college, she had a friend, we were visiting her, and it was in the suburbs out in Massachusetts, and she just walked around with this giant thing of water all day. I was like, what the fuck's going on here? How much hydrate? And these things are like a half a gallon, they're not.
And just the practicality of lugging it around.
Yeah. And so it's a part of the culture. That culture is real, and it's sustained. And so there's this really, to really set up the tension of like Verna's feelings for Wanda. the disqualifications happen, there's dueling, comparisons of the mother-daughter conversations. Like Amber's won, and she's in the car with Verna, and Shanna's lost, and she's in the car with her mother. And Wanda's saying, like, we're going to have to keep at it and keep striving. And Verna's talking about, like, well, the hard thing is in life is you have to follow the rules. Ion emphasized skill, and she's just focused on her promotion. And she literally says her mother is the disease, like, to her daughter.
Yeah, the daughter's just a symptom. Yeah. Wanda's the disease.
Right. And you're just like, whoa. And so this begins to where I think this is the inciting incidents to where she starts to imagine murder.
Yeah, and there's also this sense that, Wanda, when she talks to her daughter, and she talks so fast and such a crazy accent, but one of the things she says to them is, like, she always insists on them being low-class people, right? There's this idea. I'm like, obviously, they're from the same class. They're in the same milieu. But there's idea of this sense of class as an idea, like you're saying, of fitting in, of somehow being seen as respectable or apart from. And that idea of class as they understand it and respectability is super interesting to me, because it's almost like someone who understands or wants to be part of another milieu or of another kind of social class, but doesn't really understand what that means or what that looks like. There's this weird sense where that whole discussion of class that Wanda's talking about just makes no sense.
Well, I mean, I think it makes no sense in part because it's from we're our northeastern brains don't get it as much. Like, this is Baptist community Texas, and where
but they're both Baptists. They're both part of the same church. They're both in the same basic housing neighborhood.
But there's competition still. That's the idea. This is that kind of competition that exists, that kind of pecking at one another that's inevitable. When you seem to be on the exact same level, you have to find the little bits where you can say, I'm better than you.
Yeah.
And that's what this is in part about. It's like, oh, I am just this much better than you. And that becomes the thing that I'm going to focus on.
But like when we were growing up, where I was growing up, like, we really hated the rich kids, and there was real distinction.
Yeah, but that's the John Hughes movie. This is the
exactly.
Texas movie.
At least, there was a known identifiable enemy.
No, but this is very, very much, this is what she talked about, that this is very specific to, this town. Channel View is just like, everybody's like supposedly a man, no real striving. Everybody comes back to it. It's not even, she also wrote about how, it wasn't even one of those refinery towns that was sponsored by like an Exxon or one of the other big Gulf or whatever type companies, where a company town gets adopted by the company, and they throw tons of money into the school and into the parks and in all the major executives, along with the refinery workers. They all kind of live and coexist together and share these resources. And this is like a sidecar kind of town. And so they're just like looking for any edge they can to feel like they're better than someone else, ultimately.
Even in Karate Kid, Johnny and Daniel, right? There's real distinction. Like, I could identify with that. I can't identify with the distinction here.
I think this is also because it's more about women, Jim, right? You're just
you're just you really just did that to me on this podcast?
Yep.
Oh my God. I am sorry to all our women listeners for Michael's insensitivity to my proclivities.
It's true. It's their story, Jim. It's not ours, okay?
I'm the one who recommended Female Trouble, just so you remember that, audience.
God. Okay. And none of them have watched it. This one they might watch. Because, number one, it's on YouTube, and number two, it actually has a plot.
I'm not done with Female Trouble. That will come up in this discussion. Okay. FYI.
Okay, so for some odd reason, the ruler incident becomes the MacGuffin to thinking about murder. And I think that my favorite thing is how it's introduced. All the family, it's Shane, Shanna, Shane's friend, played by another Giovanni
Ribisi.
Ribisi.
Exactly.
Yeah, he's like 14 in this movie, and it's
Is
awesome.
Is this his first gig?
I don't know. It's really funny, and so they're watching like a trashy show about TV pageants or something, and they're really making fun of it, and they're making fun of like the girls and all this stuff, and they're like calling them sluts and all this kind of stuff, and it's really funny. And Ribisi, the person who's the friend of Shane, is like kind of like taken aback about how colorful all the language is. And, they're talking, and as part of the joking, they're talking about how they would murder, these kids or something. And this leads to, who would you want, Shane asked Giovanni Ribisi, like, who would you want to kill and why? And then, but this inspires, Wanda, and she's like, okay, I would want to kill Verna. And the boys are like, wait, what?
Exactly.
And so, and then they're like, and she's like, how would you do it? To her son, and his son's like, would put him in a car crash. He's like, no, that's terrible. Giovanni, how would you do it? Because she liked his earlier answer about what he would have done to these little kids.
Yeah,
and
it's
so
great.
This starts we're introduced to Terry earlier, but this is where she goes to Terry. And who's Terry?
Terry is her ex-husband's brother. It's played by Beau Bridges. And he's basically an ex-convict. What I love about Terry is you meet him for the first time. He's a worker at the oil refinery, and he's talking to one of his coworkers, and he pulls out this kind of list of like all the things he's done. Like, I've quit drugs after getting out of prison. Yeah. 5-year plan. I've quit drugs. I'm going to quit drinking today, right? So that's not happening. I plan on quit smoking, and then him and his friend both laugh like, yeah, that's a long way off. And then I'm going to change my financial situation. It's just brilliant. I love his 5-year plan he comes out with. It's a great way to introduce a character.
And then he alludes to being better with his wife, but then he's like, but man, she's a little crazy. And he talks about Drano, and you're like, what?
Yeah, exactly. I thought I was like, what? Drano? I'm like, I don't know. Like, that stuff's lethal.
Yeah, so we're going to get to this because this stuff comes up. She comes in hot as Terry's wife, and she's awesome.
She is something. I don't even know who that's played by, but she is something.
Oh, it's I have it written down, and she's Swoozie Kurtz, and we should look her up because you should look her up while I keep going because she's pretty great. And so, for some reason, Wanda thinks it's a good idea to reach out to Terry as to think out this idea of how, because he's a criminal. He'll know what to do. He'll know how to find other criminals to get rid of this person. And so she shows up in her car to Terry's, because Terry lives in a trailer with his wife Marla, and she doesn't even go inside. She just opens the window and honks and tells Terry to come out. And is like, let's meet me somewhere else. We got to talk. And he's like, okay. And they show up and she starts saying things to him. I want that. Do you love your niece and nephew? That's kind of how she starts it.
That's right. Yeah, she kind of manipulates him.
Yeah, do you love your niece and nephew? And he's like, yeah, more than anything, because he's fairly close to his brother Tony. You get a sense like they're not thick as thieves, but they're still close. And we see like them in family gatherings later on at Tony's place for Christmas and the holidays. And then she's like, well, you know what's happening. My daughter's losing her opportunity, and she says, and I know what's causing it. And he's like, and she kind of makes Terry believe that he should know what's going on. That's part of this like manipulation that you're talking about. And as part of that, she starts to say things like, I want that bitch gone. How much would it cost to put someone down? I want you to find me someone. And Terry's just kind of like, wait, what? And he's kind of just struggling to wrap his head around this. And so he's like literally trying to get out of the car, and she's not letting her. She's like using the electronic locks to lock him in, which is really funny. And so Terry immediately goes to talk to his friends and family and Marla. And so we're introduced to Marla, I think, earlier. So Marla is his poor wife who basically is probably got some real mental health issues. I mean, we see her.
Probably. Definitely. Yeah.
Okay, so she sprays her legs with an oven cleaner at one point.
Easy Off. For those of you who know, that brand, that is like toxicity in a bottle. And she sprayed Easy Off. I was like, what is that? I'm like, that's the shit you clean your oven with.
Yeah. Very, very, very corrosive. And then in another scene, she's seen spraying Raid.
Oh my God.
Terry.
He hides the crystal Drano because he's afraid that she's going to put it, all over her body.
We don't know what she's going to do with it.
That is serious. And then she's sitting there mumbling, scouring the sink. Yeah. And then he's throwing things at her. It's a terrible relationship, but they seem to have some their intimacy is fine otherwise. but it's such a.
He's he's telling her to stop being so crazy. He's like, I'm crazy because you made me crazy. It's like men make women. It's like women are crazy because men make them crazy or something like that.
Okay, here's my first intervention here.
Okay.
This is why I think Female Trouble is a great movie. Female Trouble makes you really feel that craziness and really feel the insanity of a potential situation like this, where the polished of a TV movie removes you a little bit from it, right? And it becomes jokey and identifiable. Whereas I think the argument for Female Trouble, which was our last film we talked about for anyone keeping score.
And this is kind of why we picked this film. I picked this film.
Yeah, it was kind of playing off this. And I think, sure, this kind of gets into the absurdity, black comedy idea. And I enjoyed it. I had fun with it. But, it's a completely different ball game than something like Female Trouble, which really makes you viscerally feel it, right? The moment of this film is very much within the early 90s, right? It has its specific moment, right? And there are other movies that I think a lot of them do something that. Let's think about Natural Born Killers, which is dealing with the media and the way in which it manipulates us. Or even one of the Bonds. Which Bond is it? I think it's Tomorrow Never Dies, where you have a Ted Turner-like figure, a media mogul. So this whole idea of the media manipulating us and all that idea of the media becomes big time. It's a big topic in 90s film, even in independent film. There's another one, Man Bites Dog, which is a French film. It's a, mock documentary where the actual documentary crew start helping this serial killer kill his victims. So they play along, and it's a big theme in 90s film. But it kind of comes and goes. You know what I mean? It's a moment, but then as we go into the 2000s, it's not nearly as important. Whereas Female Trouble seems as fresh as when it was made in 1974.
It's very difficult to watch still.
Exactly my point. It never expires.
Okay. All right.
Sorry, that was my little tangent.
Right. And so
still defending Female Trouble after all these years.
Yeah. After all these 7 days. And so what we kind of are seeing through Terry's eyes his understanding of he's self-serving ultimately in that he goes to the police his way he goes to the police initially is, and he's dealt with because he doesn't want to get, if something does happen to Verna and Amber, he doesn't want to be implicated as having known about it. So he goes to the police, and the great thing about the police is they first completely ignore him. And none other than this is another little pop up. It's Andy Richter, who's Conan and Bryant's side kid.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, good. That was another one.
Yeah. Cool. So there's all these little Easter eggs of these people in their early careers that show up. And so this finally the police start to get convinced, and this leads to in this recording. We learn at the very end of the film is a conversation that was held in a parking lot between Terry and Wanda, where they really plot out whether they're going to try to, what it would cost and how they would actually kill Verna or Amber, and whether both or one or the other. And this conversation, from the Michael Ritchie in the end credits talk, they say they basically it's word for word, So this is an actual document, and so which leads to, because this is probably the most revealing part of the entire film, where we get Wanda's mannerisms and characters expressed through Holly Hunter, and the maniacal laughing and the incredibly deep Texas twang, and saying things like we have Beau Bridges talking about, it's like, well, this guy I know, he don't like doing children, and the mother is worth a crap. It's in Wanda's response is like, oh, she's such a bitch. But if I don't have the money, and then she's talking about, I'm worried, I'll be worried if I don't come up with the money, they'd come after me, and it's just madness, and it's this wild, wonderful performance by Holly Hunter, and it kind of culminates with her saying something like, oh God, this is so bad. I can't believe I'm sitting here talking about someone's life. And then she says, the things you do for your kids.
There you go. Family Pictures Podcast. But I think for me, the interesting thing about this TV movie is basically there is never a murder. There's never even, there's a talk of it. But the fact is the brother goes right to, if Woody would have gone right to the police, the brother goes right to the police. Yep. He knows that if something happens, he thinks she's framing him. Right. And he's scared. He's been out of prison, doesn't want to go back. So in fact, Terry does the right thing. And he basically entraps his sister-in-law. And then the whole thing basically goes from them having that crazy conversation that you're talking about to her being arrested. And the whole town now, this becoming a kind of, like you said, a media circus. And this is where the media comes in, and the whole idea of what's the role in the media, what's the role in TV movies like this, and kind of perpetuating the insanity that we're watching. And so it becomes this very self-reflexive. And I think this is a very, as I was saying earlier, this is like a very 90s theme. Right. And it's something that comes up in most 90s thing. It's like, oh, self-reflection is important, or, oh, break down that fourth wall and let's look at what we're doing. It's like we're complicit in it, kind of like when, Dark Mirror makes in fun of Netflix. Even though, the Black Mirror is on Netflix, it's still like complicit in the very culture it's trying to critique. And that's always the difficulty of these 90s films, to get into the kind of media circus that's about to kind of set loose on this town.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is like that. The commenting on it is maybe not as successful as you might want it, or how it can be. Is what you're basically saying. It's the impossibility of that potentially. But the fact is, like, we were in this era where it's a version. So that is like this kind of commentary has been completely overtaken by podcasting culture and TikTok culture, and all that commentary doesn't exist now.
Filled with its own bullshit, to be clear.
Right. And so,
including this one. Yeah. I'm doing the same thing. We're complicit. I'm part of the problem.
You are the problem. I've already said this. You don't see.
But we're not asking for likes and subscribes. We don't want your fucking money, to be clear. So let's go there.
We're going to be 100 films in and saying, like, back the fuck up with your
8 subscribers, 30 views. We don't give a fuck.
It's about right now, which is perfectly fine.
So, Michael, are you doing this for another reason?
I'm just excited for when a current affair reporter is going to knock on my door and say, "Can I come inside and talk to you about Family Pictures podcasts?" And I'm going to be like, people are pretty hungry in here. Yeah. Is there a chance you could go and get some tacos for the family?
For my kids.
Go to the Taco Bell. We're pretty hungry in here.
I think that was a surprise. So, I don't want to jump too far ahead.
This is kind of the rest of the film it turns into a media circus. I mean, the frame, and we can back up because the film is
a little bit
framed from the beginning. Like, the film starts with Holly Hunter looking incredible. And they're preparing to interview her, and we're not even sure. We don't know what the interview's for. And they're asking her questions. At first it's like, it's classic third world star, fourth wall breaking stuff. We see like the the trappings of production. There's the gray card, the grayscale card that they're shooting. We hear the wild sound as she's getting mic'd up with the lavalier mic on her on her blouse. Yeah, and she's talking about how stupid this all is. Like, no one was even killed, and And she talks about things having to keep pushing. And we hear in the background someone just kind of asking her questions that are probing, and how she deflects. She's like, I was from a good family. And, is like, do you feel like you were denied because your father wouldn't be a cheerleader? And she's like, my family was great. She's just not taking any of it. And then another one, other moments, because we keep going back to this shot again and again throughout the film. And it doesn't really matter in a weird way, but it's also just this identifiable contrast of how, well, we know Wanda gets out of this ultimately from the beginning. She's going to get away with it, right? And otherwise, this interview wouldn't be happening. And
her relationship with her daughter, right, is so interesting throughout the film. Like, I mean, her daughter is really kind of just like a little Wanda robot. Like, it's hard to say otherwise. But so as we start getting into the situation where this has a ton of media, and obviously the media is starting to shop for like exclusives. It's on everything. And so they're, the ABC, they even say HBO, which it's an HBO movie, right? And, the whole like Terry and his brother. So there's like two camps. There's Terry and his brother, or three camps. Terry and his brother are figuring out who's going to get the best deal to sell their story. Wanda's figuring out the same. And then the woman
Verna.
who wanted to Verna. Verna.
Yeah. The
Verna.
Amber's mom, Verna. Heath. The Heath family, Jim. The Heath family.
Verna.
They're the ones that are the innocent victims here with their little.
That's why I don't like them. I hate victims. Yeah. So the whole idea is her, of all people, starts to play into this, and she's like, oh wait, like you can go. She's the one who tells them to go get tacos for her kids.
Exactly.
And she's out on the take too. She's trying to figure out. She's the one who says, I think Holly Hunter would be terrible for the role of Wanda. So everyone immediately switches to, I want to be not only talked about and somewhat famous, but I want to make money off of this travesty. And that's when the kind of film starts to turn to the broader critique of the media that I was I went too earlier with my critique. I wanted to talk about that. Like, this even comes up in James Bond in what is it? I said it before, Never Say Die, or Tomorrow Will Never Die. And I don't know if you remember that one, but the Tomorrow Never Die one is weird because you have this character, Elliot Carver, who's played by Jonathan Pryce. And he's basically like, one of the big figures in the 90s was Ted Turner. And the fact that Ted Turner had all this media. And remember that moment?
Yeah.
The Ted Turner moment?
I know. He was the Rupert Murdoch of the 90s.
Exactly. And so this guy, Elliot Carver, was like an evil Ted Turner, who was now James Bond, not having the Soviets to react against. Not really, we haven't come up with kind of this, terrorism. So who was the evil figure in this James Bond, Tomorrow Never Dies? It was a media mogul like Ted Turner. It was such a weird moment. And that's why the 90s, for me, is so indicative of this kind of, reflection back on itself as media and how destructive it is, which is kind of such a weird reflection because it can never really get outside of that, like, deep thought, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, it does speak to this in another way as well, because it kept throwing at us brief glimpses of the Gulf War to come. The Herbert Walker Bush, the first Bush war, Gulf War, and we are being, because at that time, for those that don't know or recall, for the 6 people who are downloading this and listening,
8 It's 8 now.
8. Okay.
Smash that like button.
We were sold a media package of why we are going to have to go to war with Iraq.
Exactly.
And it was through pictures that turned out to be filled with lies and stuff like that. So it's the same kind of interrogation ultimately. And so it's the interrogation of the tabloid journalism, but there's a subtle interrogation of the media that was presenting us a war that was about to happen in Iraq.
And it's interesting. So they were talking about Iraq on one hand, but on the other hand, they were talking about the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Right. So really trying to position us. And it's funny, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, who is the bad guy James Bond is going to go after? And like kind of this movie sets up, and again, it's a theme throughout the 90s, the media for a moment becomes the bad guy. Right? And it can't last, but it does become the bad guy in this figure of Elliot Carver.
And their favorite subject to turn into bad guys or bad women are the crazy women like Lorena Bobbitt and Amy Fisher and Tanya Harding and Pamela Smart. And that's who they're turning Wanda Holloway into. They want her to be another one of these like deranged women that are
and who comes up as well? Jeffrey Dahmer comes up again and again.
So weird too.
Yeah, it's so, but it all is about that, to your point, tabloid culture. But like Jeffrey Dahmer comes up, like I think Wanda says, it's not like I was some guy eating people in Wisconsin, right? Like there was like this real reference to Dahmer, and Dahmer, you hear about him, but it was interesting to me on that point. Like I think there can be a whole deep dive on the 90s attempt at a media critique that is always already limited by the fact that it's media that they're doing it through. So,
and there's moments too
hot take
where so Wanda hasn't been at this point, she's just out on bail. The trial's about to happen. There's a lot of indictment, and she's literally trying to get herself tried through the media initially herself. Like she goes voluntarily on Donahue, and presenting herself at like their pals, and it's really interesting. Of that era too. I was like, one of the things that struck me is so you have people from the audience of the Donahue show wanting to ask questions, but they have to be filtered through Donahue himself.
That's right.
And it's super odd. So there's this woman who stands up and she says to Donahue, standing right next to her, and mind you, they're 10 feet away on stage, and so she doesn't ask them directly the question like how you're doing. She goes to Donahue and says, I'm just wondering how they're doing as a mother and a daughter. And you're just like, that filter. And then Donahue turns around and says, how you two doing? And this like really happened. And you're like, what the fuck? This is so odd, this era of television.
It is crazy. And I mean, that's another thing with Female Trouble, to your theory that I really liked when we talked about Female Trouble. Where Female Trouble went to is it went to this crazy television and these crazy plots. But because of the way in which media mediated that, it seemed so much more toothless, if you will.
Yeah.
It didn't seem to have any of the bite as Female Trouble. My other point there is at the end of the movie, of the TV movie, you notice I always want to qualify it as a TV movie, but as this TV movie,
Jim,
I'm being very elitist.
This film won multiple Emmys for Holly Hunter, Beau Bridges, for the writing. I tell
TV
you,
movie.
they knew what they were doing.
This was a
their
TV
budget.
movie before TV movies were good.
This was considered one of the best TV movies of all time.
TV movie. So the other point that I thought was really good here was at the end of this TV movie, they came up with a whole list of the people like Wanda sued. And it was Donahue, Maury Povich, it was a who's who of.
It was even better. It was who everybody sued everybody. It was like who Verna sued, who Wanda sued, who Tony and Terry sued.
Exactly.
That at least I appreciate. They knew they were making a TV movie, so they're making total fun of themselves ultimately. And Michael Ritchie's done some really good films, not TV films.
No, but okay, can we talk about, and I appreciate that. And the fact that it was made so soon after it happened, it was super just popped out.
Well, that's something of the now too. It's like if there's a big trashy scandal. We got to turn it in. We got to sell the rights and put it into. And the funny thing is, this was the second one. ABC had done their more serious version already, yet like 8 months earlier.
But yeah, and so that's that line. This TV movie is walking. So I had it. Oh yes, Michael Ritchie. Let's go back to him. He's a fascinating figure in that he wrote this history of early television, right? Okay. So he's also like a scholar of early television, has written a lot of things that book that people reference, and something you should read, I guess, if you're a TV scholar. But also he did what I think is one of the worst movies with the greatest movie poster that I have back in my office, and sometimes you see it when I'm on this podcast. If you watch the video, is The Island. That's probably Michael Caine's worst movie ever. And he's done some bad ones. Yeah. But Michael Ritchie directed The Island. Greatest movie poster ever.
It's a family picture even.
Oh, I would watch that just to make fun of it because I hate it. Because as a kid, when I saw that movie poster and I saw that coming attraction, I was like, they're pulling from Jaws. It's got to be so compelling. Like I was locked in. And then he made the biggest piece of garbage, even for someone like me who loves a lot of that garbage. Like that's a movie that's even hard for me to like get excited about its badness.
Well, so, I mean, all I remember is like it's basically the plot where Michael Caine is losing his son to Blackbeard. That's all I can remember.
It's something like that.
Yeah. And so I mean, we're in some of the final familial moments of this picture, we have they're watching themselves constantly on TV now. Yeah. All of them, and they're watching interpretations of them on television. Of themselves on television. And there's this moment where Wanda and Shanna are sitting on the couch together, and they're talking about, well, I can't sell my rights if I'm once she's convicted. So she gets convicted as well. So she's no longer going to be able to sell rights, but they're like, well, we can have CDs sell them. We'll still be able to get our story out there. And Shanna asks her mom, like, who do you think will play me? And she's like, can I play me? And we have Wanda say, that's the plan, honey. That's the plan, sister.
She always calls her sister, which I love.
Oh, right. You're right.
That's the plan, sister, which was great. I mean, that I liked. I mean, their relationship in this TV movie was interesting, right? Like it was definitely like it did have that kind of piece that sometimes when she argues, and I love it when Wanda is so articulate, she argues like, look, I just felt like my daughter, we can turn a good thing into a bad thing. She wants to be an actress. She wants to sing and dance. Mm-hmm. If she has the opportunity to take something that was really bad and turn it into something that's really good, why should we, rob her of that experience? She has nothing to do with this. And like, by the end of it, you're convinced. You're like, Wanda, you're absolutely right. Like, I'm with you. And so I kind of like that role she plays as the manipulator and as the parent. And, as insane as she is in, what she does, right? There's also, and this is always the argument of these kind of 90s films, there's a culture behind it that makes it all possible and that sustains it or even propagates it. And so that's the kind of final critique of, the media culture in which, this small Texas town finds itself immersed in 93 or so.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine your town getting tackled by the media in this way?
Exactly. Tackled is a good word for that.
It would just be, and if you had any sort of adjacency to the major story, like if it were your best friend who's embroiled in this, or maybe it's a friend of a friend even, and how these towns ultimately can't help because they're so ultimately knit together, whether they're close knit or not. Everybody knows everybody to some extent, or they know who's who, and they're maybe it's more stratified than Channel View is. But to have this kind of scrutiny show up, and it can't help but be titillating, right? And be part of something you'd want to be part of, and like, what's my part? And I want to be in this too.
So I don't know if this is true, so you'll have to fact check me, or one of our 8 listeners will need to fact check me. Is at the end of this movie, Terry is the final word, and he basically says to his coworker friend while they're at the oil refinery, is like, is it ethical to essentially, is it ethical for me to sell my story based on an unethical act, right? And is it ethical for me to sell it? And then his friend says, I don't know. And then he basically says, yeah, it's a tough question. Let's look at the sunset. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Let's look at the big giant tankers come in. Yeah.
But like, I didn't know what to do with that. Like, was Michael Ritchie just being tongue in cheek? Or was it trying to be really like a profound moment? Because that's where I didn't know.
I don't think so. I tend to think that there's a certain schlockiness to this, and Beau Bridges being as affable but not particularly thoughtful as he is his character / actor, affable characters, a little dim-witted. They're going back to his 5-year plan ultimately.
Yeah, exactly.
And thinking something that this is now he could finally hit his final milestone, which is to be financially viable.
But arguably, he's the most ethical figure in the film because he's the one who turns in Wanda.
Yeah. I mean, but at the same time, like, Marla sure seems to think that he's doing this for self-serving reasons,
Maybe, but this is my final word on this movie is, in Female Trouble, you never have a question about where someone stands ethically. Whereas in this film, at the end, I find, there's a lot of gray in that sunset.
You don't like that ambiguity, do you? Well, I mean,
I hate it.
I mean, and just to wrap it up, we do find out that, Wanda Holloway gets off. Like, there's a mistrial because one of the actual jurors was a felon. But she does get, in the telling of this film when it was released, it hasn't happened yet, but she's tried again and she's convicted again and gets a 10-year sentence, but is released after just 6 months. So she's living happily outside of the system with her 1,000 hours of community service to the lovely community of Channelview, which I imagine she's still living in. I don't know. I haven't looked up past. So let us know, audience.
Yeah, but even the fact that her daughter now, who was an outcast before all this happened, walking around the school is basically like the most popular person in the school. She's talking about when I went to Donahue, when I went to Povich, or when I did this, and she's got a whole crew following her. So there's even that sense, like, in some ways, was what happened bad for the people involved? And I think, depending upon you look at it, like, you could say no, but then that returns us to Terry's ethical question, which I think is really not an unserious question, right? Like, I think it's a serious question that the movie's trying to ask. The only problem is it's a TV movie.
Well, I will say this is a TV movie in contrast to an art film, which we were forced to endure last week. So maybe after this week, we'll get to some more popular popcorn fare, well-known, high-minded, lowbrow.
I've decided what next week's movie is.
Well, don't tell us.
You don't want to know?
No, I want to know, but don't tell the audience. We got to keep that a secret.
I will.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. This is the Family Picture Podcast saying goodbye.
Bye-bye, everybody.